You are amazing.
Yours truly, Brevin Thompson, is back, and back with a good friend of mine who hasn't been on this channel since I did my two-part video on Zack Snyder's Justice League all the way back in March. This is something that we've both been wanting to do for quite some time, especially since we've been waiting for a damn trailer for Spider-Man No Way Home, and so far we have gotten pretty much nothing. So, just to kind of just get in the mood for it already, we decided to go over each of the Spider-Man movies leading up to Spider-Man No Way Home later this year if it does get released. Fingers crossed. And starting off with the Sam Raimi trilogy, and with the one that started it all, Spider-Man, which was directed by Sam Raimi and starring Tobey Maguire, Willem Dafoe, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, and so many talented people. Now, before we start talking about this video, we want to talk about our experiences with this movie during our childhood. For me, this was the film that made me a fan of the character Spider-Man. I mean, just everything about the film. I mean, I saw it back in 2002 with my mom. When I was 4 years old, and still, I loved it. I don't care how scary it was, I just loved it. I mean, sure, moments with the Green Goblin, I mean, it creeped me out a bit as a kid, but still, I love Spider-Man, and I still do to this day. And when it comes to the original Sam Raimi trilogy, well, the first two movies anyway, even when it came to Spider-Man 3, even though I still have issues with it as an adult, I have always adored the Raimi trilogy since it's always been like a huge part of my childhood. And since then, I mean, I still love what we got with Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, and I've always respected what Sam Raimi was doing with this character, and I never grew tired of loving Spider-Man or this trilogy, and of course the future films that we got with several different actors with, the future movies that we had with Andrew Garfield and of course Tom Holland in the MCU. Mostly I love Tom Holland in the MCU Spider-Man movies, and I think he's by far the best Spidey that we've had since Maguire, and I really can't wait to see what else we get in No Way Home. And that's the best way to tell you how much this character means to me because of how important he was during my childhood. What would you say, Cameron?
Well, first I would like to say, Brevin, I'd like to say hello to all your viewers, for all who don't remember me. Like he said, I was on the Justice League Snyder Cut review that we did a while back, and I'm very happy to be back, by the way. Thank you for having me.
Oh, anytime.
Now, as far as what Spider-Man means to me, like you, I also was very interested in the movie when it first started. I cannot even put into words like how many times I've watched it or how much of an impact it had on me, because that movie for me was the sole reason I got interested into Marvel and Spider-Man in the first place.
Yeah, same thing for me because, I mean, when it came to Marvel movies, for me back in the day, I mean, what got me interested in it was mostly Spider-Man and X-Men.
Yeah. I didn't exactly check the X-Men movies out when I was that age, but I did grow to love them quite a while later. At the same time, Spider-Man for me is like the best superhero Marvel's ever got, because to me he's like the one hero in the entire Marvel arsenal that just about anyone can relate to. You know, he's not some billionaire playboy or some guy involved in a freak accident. He's just a normal kid with normal problems. A lot of times they say anyone could be Spider-Man. Peter was just the one that happened to get bit.
Yeah, and I think like the one film that captures that, him being a normal kid with with everyday problems. I think mostly Spider-Man 2 captured that pretty well.
Yes, I can definitely agree with that. One that I think we will definitely get more into in the next review. But for this one, I have to admit, I was quite impressed the first time. It really stuck with me in a lot of ways. From one end to the next, it just was a lot of action, a lot of fun. Real good origin story for a character.
Yeah, it does pretty good on the origin story for both Spider-Man and especially the Green Goblin.
Yeah. Can't say that enough, that's for darn sure.
Yeah. One thing I can say about this film, outside of, I mean, Sam Raimi's direction for the film, is that it's really cast well. I mean, we knew, I mean, that Tobey Maguire was a good choice for Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Willem Dafoe, I mean, was perfect as the Green Goblin, even though, I mean, the suit is a bit silly. I mean, just a little quick side note. In regards to the design of the Green Goblin for the first film, do I think it's silly? Yes. Do I hate it? No. But do I think Willem Dafoe is amazing as the character? Hell, yes, I do. Because I don't think anybody else can pull that performance off as well as he did.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. And we did have a few different goblins throughout the course of Spider-Man's history. And even though we haven't had one in Tom Holland's one, I'm hoping maybe we get a chance. Willem Dafoe really captured the character quite nicely.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that.
As for the battle suit itself, I think that it's simply a matter of opinion, from one end to the next. Just about. It's probably not the ideal design most people had originally thought, but at the same time, it can have quite the significance. Real good homage to the classic look with a modern day mix.
Yeah.
Some people could say one thing, some people could say other, but the point is, it could be either way.
Yeah, that's true.
Not to be contradictory, of course.
Well, no, I wasn't questioning that at all. But yeah, I mean, I can definitely see what you're coming from that. I mean, but when it comes to that, I mean, it can be a bit silly for in the eyes of an adult, but still, I mean, you can't help but love it at the same time.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I guess at the end of the day, it really just depends on who's watching the film, what their interests are from time to time, but I guess it can be just a little from time to time.
Yeah.
It varies for me, really. But I personally enjoyed the design.
Yeah, so did I.
Yeah.
So, many of you may not know is how long a Spider-Man film has been in development hell. I mean, a lot of studios have been interested in, like, bringing Marvel characters onto the big screen, and Spider-Man was always one that a lot of studios were interested in bringing to life on the big screen. And it bounced back and forth between multiple different studios, and as well as many directors, with the biggest name being James Cameron, and he was pretty close to making a Spider-Man movie, and one of his scripts that he wrote introduced the idea of the organic web shooters, which I thought was pretty interesting, that James Cameron was actually the one who came up with the idea of the organic web shooters.
Yeah, for me personally, if I may add, what I think is rather unique these days about Tobey Maguire is that out of all the Spideys we've had, to this day, he is the only Spider-Man I know of that has been able to use organic webbing instead of web shooters. I thought that was a nice concept.
Yeah.
I was a little surprised it didn't carry over.
And outside of James Cameron, I mean, David Fincher was originally attached at one point, and even Tim Burton, and weirdly enough, M. Night Shyamalan. I mean, as much as I respect M. Night Shyamalan for some of his work, I just don't know how he could handle a character like Spider-Man. And of course, eventually it fell into the hands of Sam Raimi. And when this film first came out, I mean, it broke box office records on its opening day weekend. At the time, it had the highest grossing opening weekend of any movie in history. And it's just... I'm surprised that Spider-Man still holds up pretty well, and it came out at a time where superhero movies were kind of crawling out of their grave, so to speak, because at the time, especially in the late 90s, they were mostly viewed as, superhero movies were mosely viewed as a joke, mostly because of Joel Schumacher's Batman movies, mostly Batman and Robin, and mostly Spawn, which also came out the same year, and as well as Steel. So yeah, we all know how bad those movies are. But eventually, comic book movies just eventually regain their footing again. I mean, starting off with Blade back in the late 90s, and of course X-Men, and eventually, of course, we got Spider-Man. So there was the holy trinity that saved the superhero genre, which was Blade, X-Men, and the biggest one being Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
And You can tell that they put a lot of effort for that film, and I can't help but respect them for that.
Me either. Honestly, a lot of times I think that if it weren't for those movies, I don't honestly know, Marvel wise, that is, where we would be in this day and age. If they would even still be a company that does movies, and in addition to comic books, or if they would just be selling comic books, but how many people would want to check them out.
Yeah,
So they really pulled out all the stops with this film, and I genuinely have quite the gratitude for them.
definitely. Now, when it comes to the opening theme for the film, as well as the overall score in general, which was done beautifully by Danny Elfman, Danny Elfman has always been one of my favorite composers. I mean, outside of John Williams and Alan Silvestri, who did the Avengers movies.
Agreed. He should, I think, be right up there with them. They were great composers, came up with legendary music.
Yeah, but my favorite composer is mostly John Williams, mostly because of his work on Superman, Star Wars, E.T., Indiana Jones, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Danny Elfman is still right up there, and he's worked with Sam Raimi since his days on Darkman. When it comes to how the origin story of Spider-Man began, you can't have Spider-Man without him getting bitten by a radioactive spider. You just can't.
No, not really. There, I think, have been some realities that have found other ways to do so, but the most iconic that kind of pays tribute to the comics is that event, and for me, I'm really glad they decided to do that.
Yeah.
When it comes to the spider bite itself, the design is really cool. It's like this black and red and possibly light blue pattern all over it. And you have basically 15 genetically designed super spiders that were made from 3 individual DNA strands for certain abilities, such as jumping high, the high tensile strength webbing, and a sense of predator cognition known that we've come to know
As the spider sounds.
Precisely. And when it comes to the actual spider itself, it somehow gets out of its container, and then it gets on Peter when he's trying to take a photo of MJ for the school paper.
And of course, it bites him.
Yeah. Next thing you know, he basically just starts looking at it. We get a computer screen in the background when he leaves that shows all the DNA sequences with a new spider that matches the one that just bit him. Really gives you kind of an interesting little trivia there.
Yeah. And at the same time, when that is going on, I mean, we have like Norman Osborn, who's played brilliantly by Willem Dafoe. I mean, trying to secure an important contract with the military, and he decides to test out his performance enhancers, which was this movie's take on the Goblin serum, and testing it on himself. And when he does, of course, it goes wrong, and as a part of the side effect, he goes insane and kills his lab assistant.
Right, Dr. Strom, I believe was his name. And it's pretty interesting. For me, it kind of scared me as a kid because
it definitely scared me, especially that one random jump scare that you mentioned. I mean, when we watched it last night for this review.
Right. I believe it was right after the big transformation scene when he's lying on the floor.
Yeah.
And he's trying to regain, like, what happened last night. And we get, like, this giant jump scare that sort of, like, alludes to him being back in that chamber with white eyes and a bit of a near-death experience, I guess you could say, because he flatlined for about 2 minutes. And it's just really... Sometimes I think it could give people heart attacks if you're not careful, but it really, I guess if you wanted to include a healthy dose of like the horror element, which Sam Raimi apparently was very good at.
Yeah, especially with his Evil Dead movies.
Right, then I guess that's the best way you can do it in a PG-13 movie about Spider-Man.
Well, he does. I mean, he had like a few. I mean, he sprinkled a little bit of horror elements into this trilogy. I mean, mostly. I mean, few things involving the Green Goblin, and of course, in Spider-Man 2, when you had that really intensely made hospital scene in Spider-Man 2. And of course, I mean, the moments with Venom at the climax of Spider-Man 3. Now, when it comes to the scenes with Peter discovering his powers because of the spider bites, I mean, mostly, I mean, he doesn't need to wear glasses anymore. I mean, the one thing that they captured well was the nerdy Peter Parker side of this character. Is, I mean, at first when we're introduced to him, we see him trying to catch the bus, and nobody wants to support him but MJ. And I mean, not even nerdy kids want to sit next to him, want him to sit next to him. And
yeah, even the big guy like in the seat next to MJ and Flash Thompson, you know, like he says, "I'd like to tell you that's me next to her," and then heck, I'd even take him. And this big guy's eating like this jelly donut.
Yeah.
And even he won't let him on. It's
Yeah.
just weird.
Yeah, and I love that one moment where he saves MJ. I mean, because I mean she slipped on the orange juice or something, and then he catches her, and then catches all of her lunch. And apparently that wasn't CG, and apparently it took like I think like 157 takes to finally get that right.
Yeah,
which is something that, I mean, that is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I honestly, when my friend here told me that, I couldn't believe it. I honestly thought that was computer generated in some way or another. But if that really was Tobey Maguire doing that stunt, then I, for one, salute and give my top hat off to you if I was wearing one for that scene, because that is one scene that not very many people can really pull off. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, to prepare him for the role, he acquired a lot of training. I mean, he hired a yoga instructor, a rock climbing instructor, and a martial arts expert.
Yeah, I guess if you're going to be Spider-Man, you need to pull out the big guns, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's definitely true. And the one quick moment with this fight with Flash Thompson, I also really liked, especially the slow motion moment where he's dodging his punch.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting because a lot of viewers, I think, if you did that at normal speed, would often think that he's like trying to pull something, you know, or he's just a bad aimer, like either Peter or Flash from one end to the next. But when you do the slow-mo, you can actually see Flash's fist trying to go straight in, and then Peter just dodges it like it's nothing over and over again. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and of course he gets the upper hand on Flash, and when he leaves school, I mean, we get the famous brawl crawling moment. And I remember as a kid, and I swear to God, I am not making this up, I would have my dad pick me up almost everywhere that we go. I mean, mostly at home. And I would try to reenact that scene every single time. That's how much I loved this movie as a kid.
Yeah, I also personally enjoyed this movie, that particular scene in the movie, a lot as a kid. When I was younger, I basically was so into that movie at the time that I would take one of my old Spider-Man suits across on vacations to various places. And in the hotel rooms that we did, I often tried to do the wall crawling scene and then use the hotel beds for rooftops on buildings to jump back and forth, trying to reenact it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, don't we all try to do that at some point if we're a big fan?
Yeah, and his first attempt at web swinging is also pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All Spider-Men, in my opinion, had to start somewhere. A lot of times, web swinging, along with trying to learn how to control, you know, the stickiness of your hands when you're crawling walls, is like the toughest part to mastering your powers.
Yeah, I think that Into the Spider-Verse captured that pretty well with Miles.
Yeah, but we also have seen that concept a lot of different ways in comic books, movies, video games, from one end to the next. But the thing is, even though that was like just hilarious, the way that he gets ready to swing, jumps off, and then hits a billboard. At the same time, he's trying to learn how to master his powers, and they often say, with every Spider-Man, you often wonder if there's a point where you're just ready for it, but I remember a quote from Into the Spider-Verse. He said, "When do I know I'm Spider-Man?" He said, "You won't. It's a leap of faith." In the end, that's all it is, Miles. A leap of faith.
When it comes to his little montage of him coming up with costume designs because he's about to go into the wrestling ring to win some money because he wants to buy a car to impress Mary Jane. That montage, as well as that music, is so catchy. And you even said that every time you said that you had when you were a kid, that you had a Spider-Man coloring book, and you had that music in your head whenever you did, like color like Spider-Man.
Yeah, I would often, when I was a kid, I was very into it enough that Spider-Man had a lot to do with my life. I even collected coloring books and used markers to try to make a picture that was kind of like the one he ended up drawing for that montage. It really, and that scene in the movie really brought back that memory. It was a real good time for me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And of course, we later get to that one scene with him and Uncle Ben, who's played brilliantly by Koepp Robertson, rest in peace.
Indeed.
And of course, he gives him the speech of, with great power comes great responsibility. And that doesn't feel forced because, it's honestly needed because that's what helps Peter stay on the right path. But in this scene after that, he chooses not to listen to Ben's advice, and of course he goes to the wrestling ring and goes up against Bonesaw, who's played excellently by Randy Savage, aka the Macho Man.
I hope he had a good career.
Yeah, he definitely did, especially before he passed away. And still, he was pretty popular back then. I'm not huge on wrestling, but I've done some research here and there just to give you all my ideas on certain wrestling. And of course, that's not the only extended cameo that we have in this scene. Of course, we have Bruce Campbell, who has a few cameos here and there in the trilogy. At first, he appears as the announcer in the ring. And of course, in Spider-Man 2, he was the usher in the theater. And his best in the trilogy in Spider-Man 3, playing the Finch Maitre d' in the restaurant. But I fucking love Bruce Campbell, and I actually had a chance to meet this guy. I don't know if anybody knows this, but I actually had a chance to meet this guy in person downtown in Louisville a few years ago, and he's one of the funniest people I have ever met, and I just I bumped into him, and this was like I said, this was a few years ago, and it was around the time Ash vs. Evil Dead aired on Starz, and I remember him asking me what I thought of the show, and I used this catchphrase, groovy.
Yeah, I also thought Bruce Campbell personally did a good job as the narrator for each of the Spider-Man games.
Yeah.
For the first 3 movies, he was the narrator in each of the video games.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny sometimes.
And he often pops up in Sam Raimi's movies, ever since Evil Dead, because, they're very good friends.
Yeah. And personally, I hope that we get a chance to possibly see him again later down the road.
Yeah, or even in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, because Sam Raimi's directing that.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of fan theories that what happens in the new Spider-Man film will extend into that. So I, for one, am looking forward to seeing what the future holds for them.
Yeah. As part of what his role is in this film, I like right before Peter makes his big entrance. His original name was the Human Spider, and I always loved when he's like, the Human Spider. That's it. That's the best you got.
Yeah.
Oh, that sucks. The sum of $3,000 will be paid to the terrifying, the deadly, the amazing Spider-Man. So he gives Peter his name.
Yeah, it really was interesting when I was a kid to find out that was how he got his name. I used to wonder that because I didn't understand. But going forward, I was glad he kept that name. It was a lot more catchy, and at the same time, the wrestling match that came after that, it was...
I've always loved the wrestling match between Peter and Bonesaw.
Yeah, we both have, this personal line in there that when they go into the cage match...
What are you doing up there?
Staying away from you.
That's a cute outfit. Did your husband give it to you?
Where, Bonesaw tries to get him when the ring starts. He jumps up and he goes, "What are you doing up there? Staying away from you." That's a cute outfit. Did your husband give it to you?
One of the few complaints that that Tobey Maguire Spider-Man has was that he wasn't really quippy enough. But, I mean, they're here and there in the trilogy, but I mean, he's much more serious.
Yeah, I often think of him as more, by comparison to the others, like a more serious Spider-Man, probably because he's already in college and has a lot to worry about between his jobs, his responsibilities and all that. But it turns out that in the movies, he doesn't have near as many jokes as he does in the video games. I honestly never understood
the video
why.
games kind of nailed the quips as well as the jokes.
Yeah, but in the movies, he's only got like one or two, give or take, that are actual jokes. The rest is, in my opinion, mostly just serious, which is good. But that's why, to me, I think he made more of a better Peter Parker than Spider-Man, and the others kind of took the other ways.
That's one thing I can agree with you on. But I mean, still, that one scene with him and Bonesaw, I've always loved. I think it holds up pretty well.
Yes, I would definitely agree with that beyond a shadow of a doubt. A few times, though, I often wonder, just if he had done a few more jokes, like, to kind of break the tension. Like, would it have been funny? Would it have been serious? How would Bonesaw have reacted? It's a lot of film theory.
Now, of course, after Peter wins the match, I mean, all he gets out of that was just $100 instead of 3,000. And of course, I mean, the promoter ends up getting robbed, and Peter, he just lets him go just to get payback.
Yes, as I recall the incident went, for those of you who may not have seen that one, you see, as my friend here said, Peter gets only $100 after he wins the match. And he says, $100, the ad said 3,000. And he said, well, check it again, webhead. It said $3,000 for 3 minutes. And you pinned him in 2. For that, I'll give you 100, and you're lucky to get that. And he goes, I need that money. And he goes, I missed the part where that's my problem. Right after that, the robber, who we later found out was Dennis Carradine, shows up. The character name was Dennis Carradine, not the actor.
Yeah.
He shows up with a gun in a bag, asks him to put it in, gets robbed, runs down the hallway, and Peter just lets him into the elevator as it finally shows up. And when Dennis goes, he thanks Peter for it. They ask him what's wrong with him. He let him go. And he goes, you could have taken that guy apart. Now he's going to get away with my money.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
Exactly. That's just Carmen payback right there.
Yeah, and of course it leads to the death of Uncle Ben, and since then, that is still a heartbreaking moment.
Yeah. To be honest, for me, I have seen that movie like more times than I can even count. Basically, years. Like just how old I am from one end to the next. I've seen that so many times, over and over again. But even to this day, every time I see that scene, I just get real tears every time I see it, because it's just so sad, and they captured the moment beautifully.
Yeah.
It's just a genuine heartbreak.
Yeah, it definitely is. And with the scenes with Peter, I mean, in his homemade costume, like swinging through the city, mostly with the wall crawling moment. I mean, when we see him in his homemade suit, I mean, the CG in this is kind of hit and miss. I mean, because it looks a bit dated, because it's almost like it almost feels like some cutscene that you would see in a video game. Plus, it almost kind of reminds me of something, kind of a similar mistake that they did in The Matrix Reloaded with Neo battling the numerous clones of Agent Smith. And when it comes to the swinging moments, those I don't mind, because, I mean, the effects here, I mean, in the movie are, I mean, some of them work, I mean, but they have dated a little bit quickly than, say, Spider-Man 2.
Yeah. Honestly, at times I go a little back and forth on what you mean by dated, because a lot of times it seems pretty realistic to me, but at the same time, one thing to remember is that back then they didn't have all the tech that they do now to make it look realistic. So
yeah, I can understand your point on that. And the supervisor on the visual effects was Don Dykstra, who would later win an Oscar for his work on visual effects on Spider-Man 2.
And for the record, if that's really the case, I, for one, cannot think of a better person to get an Oscar in that department. He really pulled out all the stops for this trilogy.
Yeah, but, well, he mostly worked on Spider-Man 1 and 2, but instead of doing the effects for Spider-Man 3, he instead chose to work on Hancock.
Oh, interesting choice.
Yeah.
But even still, the effects, I think, were quite great, as well as the theme going by as he goes for his first swing. He's out for revenge, and he's just like having the time of his life, if you ask me, as he's getting down to the car.
Yeah.
And, he's just trying to keep up. But then, he's angry enough to a point where he just punches the glass of Uncle Ben's car to make the guy crash and then go full out for revenge at the warehouse.
Yeah, and speaking of Uncle Ben's car, that car has appeared in almost every single one of Sam Raimi's movies.
Yeah. For reasons I think we'd rather not tell you, but at the same time, it really had an important role to play in Sam Raimi's lifestyle, I think. When I found out about it, I was a little surprised, but I could see why he would want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when it comes to the scene in the warehouse where Peter finally confronts the robber, and he finds out that it was the same guy he let get away. And this has always a bit controversial. I always thought that Peter is the one that kills him, but no, it's because of the robber's own stupidity, and because he trips over a pipe and falls to his death.
Yeah, I like to think the reason for that is, one, first of all, Peter's not a killer. He tries his best to avoid that at any cost, find another way.
Yeah.
But even out for revenge on that front, the most he did was he confronts the guy, finds out it's the same guy he let go. He gets shocked for a second because he realized he could have stopped him. And then right after that, the robber thinks he has him made, so he's about to shoot him. But Peter sees it, reacts, twists the guy's arm, and takes the gun out of his hand. After that, the guy basically is out of breath, and he's scared. He just can't believe what he's up against. So he takes a step back because he's afraid of Peter, trips over a pipe and falls out the window.
Yeah.
So, yeah, really it was kind of just, as you put it, his own stupidity that caused his own death.
Yeah. Yeah, and then after that we get that brief little introduction to the Green Goblin after he destroys the Quest Aerospace, I think that's what it's called. Their endoskeleton.
Exoskeleton.
Their exoskeleton. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was almost confused with Terminator when I said endoskeleton. My bad.
Yeah.
So he destroys it and kills pretty much everybody. And I mean, like I said, the suit for the Green Goblin I don't mind.
To be fair, though, I think in that shot we didn't exactly get a full-on view, but we could definitely get for a second if you did it in slow motion.
Yeah, but we don't really fully see him until the Unity Day Festival scene.
Yeah, the Unity Day Festival.
Yeah. And of course we get that montage. I mean, after Peter graduates high school, we get the montage of Peter as Spider-Man, saving people throughout New York and stopping various crimes. Now, interestingly, how this was supposed to point out, if you've done the research or checked out the original teaser trailer, that wasn't, what we got in the film, that's not how it was originally supposed to start. If you watch the teaser trailer, this, I bet you, is how it was supposed to start with, if you watch the teaser trailer, it involved a mini plot of a group of bank robbers escaping in a helicopter, and they get caught in a net, which reveals to be a giant spider web, which was spun between the World Trade Center towers, but this was cut due to 9/11.
Yes, and in the event that you have not seen that, my friend here has decided to put the link in the description so that you will be able to see for yourself through it. And also, even in the shot that we got, if you look close, right at the second before it ends, you can see Spider-Man's close-up mask, and briefly in the lenses, you can
see the World Trade Center tower. I mean, they had a second of the teaser in there, but that was about it, really.
Yeah, but I guess for what they decided to do, you could only get a second, and it probably could come across as any building.
Yeah.
And the helicopter's not there either because it's too far away to see.
Yeah, but I mean, I can respect them for like not putting that there because obviously.
Yeah, for reasons I'm pretty sure that everybody already knows.
Now, when it comes to perfect casting in this film, hands down, it goes to J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson because every scene with him is absolute gold. It's just like. I almost want a short film with just JJ alone because I can't really picture anybody else other than J.K. Simmons playing this character as well as he did because you just can't picture anybody else than J.K. Simmons.
Yes, and for that reason, among others, I must admit, I express my deepest gratitude and honors to both Disney and Marvel for Spider-Man Far From Home. In the post-credits scene, they decided to bring J.K. Simmons back as J. Jonah Jameson for the Spider-Man of that universe.
Yeah, the moment I saw that in Far From Home, I was just like, good Lord, they brought him back. I could not believe it. Especially, I mean, when he popped up before the big reveal, I was like, oh my God, they actually did that.
Yeah,
but
they even brought back the Bugle, the inside of the offices.
Yeah.
In the final swing when he's going to get MJ. It's the office they used for the original trilogies in the film.
Yeah.
It's
yeah, I mean, I really love what they managed to do with this character, and almost you can quote pretty much every line that J.K. Simmons says as JJ, and you're just like, yes, this man is J. Jonah Jameson.
Plus, depending on your level of humor, you might just laugh your head off every time.
Yeah.
I mean, it varies. But yeah, I personally, growing up, I laughed my head off almost every time. Although,
yeah, he's just perfect.
Yeah. Put it on the front page. Cash money for a picture of Spider-Man. If he doesn't want to be famous, then I'll make him infamous.
Yeah, way to go, Pickle Puss. Glad to see you're still in it.
Yeah, that's definitely what I mean.
And that's not inappropriate, actually. Spider-Man calls him that a lot in most of the old cartoons. If you look it up, he calls Jameson Pickle Puss, probably.
Especially in the 90s cartoon.
Yeah, probably because he never shaves that mustache. In fact, I believe in one time, Jameson even said in that cartoon, I'm not going to stop till you're brought to justice, even after he helps him. And he goes, well, I'll never stop until you shave that mustache, so we're even.